This is based on my thesis, my research for my MPhil. The topic changes every time I attempt to write it down because I can never quite find the phrasing that really expresses the complexity of the things that I'm studying. I'm calling it on this, what am I calling it here? Mapping lesbian spaces in Trinidad, sexual citizenship, belonging and constructing safe space. I also call it geographies of sexuality because I'm looking at the different place and how place kind of shapes people's behavior. So exactly what Angelique was just talking about in terms of belonging, that's why I'm coming right after her. Because this is what I'm looking at in my research and how belonging in different spaces in Trinidad for non-normative, women of non-normative sexualities. Hence the lesbian part is a bit tricky because it kind of narrows the range of the people who I'm actually researching, but it's women of non-normative sexualities. So women who identify as bisexual, pansexual, fluid, or who just don't like the word lesbian but might say it anyway, but they just don't like the word. So it's just a technicality in terms of how they identify and so on. Slide? Right. My thesis looks at the cultural geographies of space and place and how material cultures and social histories get grafted onto neutral space to create a physical geography of place as it relates to lesbian identity and citizenship. Okay, that might sound confusing. It just means that space is emptiness and neutral, like the room that we're in right now. But the things that are here, the people who are present, we kind of shape it and give it a meaning. So if there were different people in here, if the furniture was different, the walls were painted differently, the place itself would take on a different kind of connotation and meaning. So based on the meanings that are ascribed to certain spaces that make them into places, how then do women of non-normative sexualities relate within those spaces? How does the space then come to govern behavior and the ways in which they enact or choose not to enact their sexuality? Space takes on meanings of class, gender, ethnicity, race, sex, etc. My research investigates how the non-normative woman or non-heterosexual women experience these spaces and places and navigate their meanings. My demographic includes women who are 18 and over, and like I said before, they identify differently, very differently. All of the participants of my study I find online because I'm looking at that online space and how that becomes a place of belonging for some women. Does it or does it not become a space of belonging? And so what I'm really going to focus on here today is a technique that I'm using called mapping. And that's where the participants draw maps to express how they feel about the spaces within which they dwell. So where they work, where they lime, where they hang out, where they choose to do what behaviors, and how the different contexts shape the ways in which they behave. And they are asked basically, well, where do you feel comfortable? Where do you feel safe? Usually the exercise needs some explanation, and I have to pose different questions to get them to kind of open up. So it's like an interview tool, a technique just for them to kind of change the approach in which they're speaking. So instead of me asking them directly questions about their home life or their work or where they've been discriminated against and things like that, it comes out through the exercise. So while they're drawing the maps. And I've brought some to show you. Can you change? Right, okay, so this is one map. I'm sure it's not what you expected. I'm really focusing on this one map here, but there are some others at the end that I'll just show you. And if you would like to hear more about the others, you can YouTube my name, and another presentation will come up that goes into some of the details in the other maps. So in this map, we can look at the differences in subjectivities. This relates to how the women are viewed, how they are seen, how they are treated in a given context. And it is an experiential aspect of the sexual matrix. So we say the sexual matrix is desire, experience, their identity, and behaviors. And this is the experiential aspect. The things that the women are, how they feel based on how people are treating them. And this participant, we'll call her Endare, This is how she depicted her map. Everywhere is not fixed. There is no kind of static security or static feeling of acceptance that she gets anywhere. For her, everywhere is a sort of threatening space. She says that every space poses a potential threat and can at one moment be okay, but at another moment become scary because the components, the inhabitants, the mood of that space has changed. The bedroom, for instance, we tend to think of the bedroom as a very intimate space. That's yours. That's where you can be who you are, right? And she's saying that while she can be there in one moment, chilling on her bed with her girlfriend, if somebody opens the door or something, it changes the whole feel of the space. But what really for her was problematic was that while she was in that space, that people outside the space was talking about her. So she wasn't out, she wasn't open about being in a same-sex relationship, but there were so many rumors that even her bedroom felt like an unsafe space, that what she was doing there, she wasn't allowed to be doing it, right? The same thing with online. She said she would post anonymously online because sometimes when she posted things, people would tell her, why you have that up, take it down. Or how dare you put up something like that? What provoked you to put up something like that? If it's a picture where two people of the same sex are embracing or kissing or a kind of erotic image. So all of that combined to make her feel as though everywhere is unsafe. She's traveling in a taxi and she's hearing people talking about her and things like that. So because she works as a public figure, she's highly visible in her area. So people were kind of scrutinizing her. And her map reflected that kind of feeling. Can you switch? All right, so this is the quote about that. Before Davy and I started Lyman, already rumors started in the area. People used to talk as if we were together because she used to spend a lot of time at my house. So this is the bedroom thing, right? Even the downstairs neighbors started asking my friends them if I gay, and they deny it because at that time no one knew anything, but plenty of people know her and know me. I didn't even know at that time I was attracted to women. Sorry, where am I? When we really started to date each other, we didn't come out. It's not like we could have because she's in the military and they're very strict about that kind of thing. So this is a quote from her interview where she's explaining that same phenomenon, right? Okay. Another aspect that she brings out through discussing her map is being confined by patriarchal gender roles and right femininity. So the heteropatriarchal descriptions of what it means to be a woman and how a woman should act and how a woman should behave, those things were coming out in her map. The quote was supposed to be about both of them going to a military dance. And they went with two men, supposed as heterosexual couples. They went as heterosexual couples, but when they started to drink, so she was saying, well, you know when the alcohol hit your head, you start to grind a little closer, and then everybody know what is what. So that was supposed to be the quote there, I'm sorry. So everybody knew what was what, because she's expected to be with a man, the other woman's expected to be with a man. The way they were dressed, people were reading it, reading the body language and everything. And women aren't supposed to be grinding on women like that. You were saying, you know, the shadow yesterday. You grind and you don't want it to look like you're really jamming on the woman behind you. The club too crowded. It's like that, right? So the body language is being read a particular way, and this is not proper behavior according to heteropatriarchal definitions of femininity, not the way women should behave. Right? But this was the quote for online and not being safe online. Right? So I was thinking about if online is a kind of extension of physical space. So the paranoias, the fears, the anxieties that fill the actual physical space that people inhabit are those same sort of dynamics happening within the online space. And she's saying that for her it does. For others in this study, they haven't said the same thing, but there are others who do repeat this, that they don't want people who they are friends with them, so their contacts, they don't want their contacts to see these aspects of their lives, right? Okay, well, there's just a couple more maps. So you can see it's very different. This one is a geographic representation of space, and this participant, she's older, she's been through a lot more. The places that she points out, she said it has a lot to do with knowing people there. That's why she feels comfortable, because this space is occupied by things she's familiar with, people who accept her, things like that. Slide again. Another geographical map, but this one represents the same thing that Endea's maps shows. A lot of anxiety, a lot of paranoia. Slide. This is another representation of space. Emma has a kind of in a geometric kind of fashion, but the things she talks about are a lot more fluid, a lot more freedom. Her map brings out some stuff on ethnicity. Hers on genes, which was the very busy Trinidadian map. If you YouTube my name, you'll see some information about those maps. Right? Okay, thank you. I think that's it. That's it. So if you need to contact me, that's my information. If you have suggestions, because I'm still working on this, very open to suggestions, that's my email. Thank you.
Identifying as non-normative, because where I come from, the countryside, I come from Williamsville, and all my life I've noticed women who, if we were to put up a checklist of what non-normative sexuality looks like, they could fill in those check boxes, but they never identify as non-normative. First, they don't identify, and secondly, they wouldn't identify as non-normative. They're just women. And Trinidad is so complex for various reasons. We all know what the reasons are, culturally, racially, and that kind of thing. So I want you to complicate or nuance your argument by what you mean as, one, identify as a verb, and then what do you make clearer your understanding of what it means to be non-normative.
Non-heterosexual, basically, and the identifying part is challenging, which is why I'm having to pull teeth to get people to participate, because they're not really willing, or they don't have the time. A lot of people are willing, but they just don't have the time. But a lot of women, they don't want to open themselves up by participating in this study, the women who I've been trying to contact. I'm going to start again trying to contact people, and I need them to say, yes, I fall into this bracket, in order for me to be able to study them. So they have to identify somehow as, well, I don't fit the norm, I don't fit what society expects of me. And that's really for them to do, and then I will explain how they do that. So there's sections in my paper that are going into what they identify as, why they identify that way, and the complexities of identity and identifying, and it's overlapping with the subjectivity, because they are identifying based on how people kind of treat them. Like, well, I know I'm different because people are treating me in this way, but how am I different? What is within me that defines me as being different, right? So it's a very complex thing that I'm trying really hard to explain in the paper, right?
Kind of think of maps as very objective. So it's interesting to see maps as being subjective representations. I was wondering if from those subjective experiences, if you're finding common themes of what makes a safe space for lesbians.
There are common themes, yes. So I'm focusing on things like race, ethnicity, gender more broadly, those kinds of things, and class, and how when a space takes on a certain class identity or ethnic identity or whatever, how that shapes the space. So the safety aspect itself is totally based on the individual and how they are interacting with this space. So the space isn't safe by definition. So all of the things kind of come together and interact with the person, and that shapes the safety. So it isn't something that's fixed. So again, it's not looking at safety as a fixed construct, but things that, how it affects the individual. and how they see the space. And Alicia, sorry, that's good. That answers what you're asking. And they are explaining the maps, right? I'm not interpreting the maps. Because some people have asked about that in the past, like, am I interpreting it correctly? I'm not doing any interpretation. They are explaining what they mean, why they put things where they are. It's an activity that we're doing together. With the identification, that's why I'm trying to get everyone from online groups, and they're part of some kind of LGBT group, so they're already kind of identifying in a way. Yeah.
Can I just ask you about that, about what it would mean if you didn't ask for an identification, if you just asked, do you know, about behaviours rather than identities? So if you just, instead of asking people, do you identify as, you know, gay or lesbian, or if you just said to them, you know, around your sexual practices, you know, are there kind of, what I'm trying to say is, in a way, does the need to identify, one, define your field of study or constrain your field of study, and two, in a way, are you giving people a kind of vocabulary for which they then have to process themselves in order to be part of that? Do you see what I mean? Whether the feedback between the terminology and subjectivity is...
It's kind of been an issue. That's why it's so hard to pinpoint a title. Because some of the women, they don't identify as anything. They just do what they do. So they say, well, I'm fluid. And they kind of go with that. But it's the way I kind of propose that people get in contact with me if they would like to participate and stuff. I have a flyer. It says, are you heterosexual or not heterosexual? And people kind of, they interpret it in their own way. And it does present limitations, but I can't approach everybody individually to kind of clarify. So it's the easiest kind of way to get people.
I just have an observation to make with regards to defining in terms of behavior. As a society, we're really uncomfortable talking about sex. So that language is a little bit difficult for us. So if you ask somebody, you know, defined by what you do, that is actually quite difficult. We might quicker say that I love women, or I'm lesbian, or I'm bisexual, or I'm fluid, I'm whatever. But to talk in sexual terms, that actually is quite difficult for us.